Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, let's just dive right into this absolutely shocking legal reversal by unpacking the stark, factual details that literally unraveled a massive global headline. We are, of course, talking about the Alex Murdaugh murder convictions being completely overturned by the South Carolina Supreme Court. Now, the highest court in South Carolina, they did not mince words when describing the exact moment the integrity of the justice system collapsed in this case. The justices explicitly stated that efforts for a fair trial were completely in vain because the Colleton County Clerk of Court, Rebecca Hill, placed her fingers on the scales of justice. I mean, that is incredibly powerful language coming from a Supreme Court, and it perfectly sets the stage for everything we're going to unpack today. So, here's our roadmap. 1. The convictions are overturned. 2. The murders and the trial. 3. Jury tampering by the clerk. 4. Unfair financial crimes evidence. And 5. The uphill battle for retrial. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the convictions are overturned, a shocking reversal. This whole mistrial ultimately comes down to a unanimous 5-0 decision by the state Supreme Court justices ordering a brand new trial for Alex Murdaugh. You know, this wasn't some split decision or a minor technicality that the judges argued over. Nope. Every single justice agreed that the original trial was fundamentally compromised and that a new trial is legally required. Moving right along to Section 2, the murders and the trial, from A to Z. To really understand why this 5-0 ruling matters so much, we have to look at the sheer scale of the timeline here. It all begins with the tragic June 2021 killings of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh at the family's dog kennels. Then, fast forward to 2023, the entire world watched a massive, highly televised 6-week murder trial end in a conviction. But in December 2023, all this quiet, behind-the-scenes corruption came to light when Clerk Rebecca Hill pleaded guilty to misconduct. And that ultimately triggered the 2026 Supreme Court unanimous reversal. It's just a staggering chain of events, from A to Z. And it's really important for us to impartially note here that despite the initial life sentence, Murdaugh and his defense team emphasize that he has maintained his innocence regarding the murders from day one. He pleaded not guilty, and with the overturning of the trial, that foundational legal presumption of innocence is now completely reinstated. Which brings us to Section 3, jury tampering by the clerk behind closed doors. So the absolute core of this mistrial comes down to how the clerk systematically influenced the jurors' decisions. According to court findings, Rebecca Hill explicitly told jurors to watch him closely. She instructed them to not be fooled by the defense's evidence. And then, as they actually began deliberations, she essentially rushed them by stating, "This shouldn't take us long." I mean, wow, these statements actively steered the jury toward a guilty verdict, totally breaking the foundational rule of an unbiased jury. And the impact here wasn't just theoretical either. We actually have a sworn affidavit from a juror that makes the abstract idea of tampering devastatingly concrete. This juror swore under oath that the clerk's comments directly influenced her decision to find Murdaugh guilty, simply because she believed the clerk was implying that he was guilty. When the official managing the jury actively implies guilt, well, the whole system breaks down. Adding to the sheer absurdity of the situation, the very person sworn to protect the justice system's integrity was out there misusing public funds and writing a tell-all book about the trial. The Supreme Court even noted that her book, which was ironically titled Behind the Doors of Justice, was pulled from publication due to plagiarism. She subsequently pleaded guilty to office misconduct, obstruction, and perjury. Just wild. Let's pivot to Section 4, unfair financial crimes evidence, prejudicing the defense. So, while jury tampering was absolutely a fatal flaw, the Supreme Court cited a second, equally major legal reason for throwing out the conviction. The justices weighed the clerk denying him an impartial jury equally against the judge allowing way too much financial evidence, which they said created a massive danger of unfair prejudice. To grasp this financial evidence piece, we have to remember that Murdaugh was a disgraced lawyer. He's actually currently serving separate 27- and 40-year sentences for federal and state financial crimes, basically stealing from his law partners and clients to fund an extravagant lifestyle and a pretty severe painkiller addiction. The prosecution argued he committed the murders to hide these financial crimes, which allowed massive amounts of this corruption data to be presented during the murder trial. So what exactly is unfair prejudice? Well, in legal terms, it happens when evidence improperly sways a jury's emotions, totally overpowering its actual factual relevance to the charges at hand. The Supreme Court ruled that flooding the jury with days upon days of testimony about Murdaugh's financial misdeeds unfairly prejudiced them against him in a trial that was strictly supposed to be about murder. It painted a picture of a deceitful man, which ultimately compromised the jury's ability to objectively weigh the evidence for the murder charges themselves.
And finally, Section 5, the uphill battle for retrial. What happens next?
The Attorney General has vowed to aggressively retry the case as soon as possible. But honestly, that brings us to an incredibly steep legal mountain. This quote from New York Law School professor Anna Kaminsky really hits the nail on the head. She points out that in a case that spawned global documentaries, endless podcasts, and massive true crime tourism, finding fair and impartial jurors is going to be extremely difficult. You're basically looking for a needle in a haystack, someone who somehow hasn't already formed an opinion on Alex Murdaugh based on the last few years of intense, nonstop media coverage.
So I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. If our justice system strictly relies on impartial juries, how can true justice be served when the scales were already tipped on the global stage? How do you unring a bell that was literally heard around the world? It's a fascinating legal dilemma for sure, and the way the courts handle this retrial is going to be analyzed for decades to come. Thank you so much for exploring the facts with me today on The Explainer, and remember to keep questioning how our systems actually work behind closed doors. See you next time.